Okay, hello and welcome to Shophouse number 6, the graduates reading of 2023. Lovely to see everybody here tonight. I know this is a very busy time of the year and there's a lot going on with the show. But welcome to Professor Gregory Ledbetter, the Masters in Creative Writing External Examiner for Goldsmiths London, distinguished guests, colleagues in the School of Creative Industries at LASALLE. It's always wonderful to see you here. Part-time lecturers, and I believe one of our part-time lecturers is not here yet, but I'm sure she'll get here. Alumni, students and family, partners and friends. It's great to see you here. Tonight we acknowledge the graduating students of the Masters in Creative Writing. The graduates reading tonight represent their classes of 2022 and 2023, so there's a bit of a flow over, which is unusual, but there are reasons, which I won't go into. Welcome to our distinguished part-time lecturer. Thank you. So not with us tonight, but part of the graduating class of 2022 students were Gayatri Krishnakumar, Hari Bharadwaj, Sarah Patricia Kelly, and students from the class of 2023 who aren't reading tonight, Bensa Kaposi, Yanhavi Kabra, Nabila Azara, Ryan Chang and Shruti Tangal, and I'm sure their classmates will remember them well, all of those students, but predominantly those people have returned home to their home countries at the end of their studies. So let's applaud those who cannot be here with us at this showcase reading tonight. The Masters in Creative Writing is taught through coursework of 4 modules that cover the topics of poetry, dramatic writing, fiction and non-fiction, with a final thesis in any genre of 20,000 words. And the graduates who are not quite graduates yet, but the students who are reading tonight, predominantly, have just completed their theses, so well done to those people, and well done to the people from 2022 who already attended convocation. And we have a person who completed at the end of last year as well, who graduates this year. So I'm just going to do a short speech to set the scene a little bit. So I thought about speaking about the benefits of a master's degree in creative writing and the importance of a humanities education more generally, which is a kind of big concern of many people at the moment. But I thought I would instead speak about the privilege it is to be a teacher and to be in the same room as the Masters in Creative Writing students and to read their works and to hear their stories. In coming to Singapore, and I might cry, I was not prepared for the genuine desire to learn, to explore, to experience and to write that I've encountered in the classrooms and in assignments that the students undertake. Through students' work, I have learned about culture. I've learned about the social and the historical, of not just Singapore and the Malay, Chinese, Tamil heritage and others too, of course, but I have learnt of the regions with students from Indonesia, India, and further from the United States and the United Kingdom. I have learnt about culture through life writing, food writing, travel writing, through fiction, scripts and poetry. I have learnt about the ideas, themes and genres that are important. I have learnt about mental health, melancholy, anxiety, schooling systems, family relations, sexuality and gender. I've also found out about place and space and the pleasures and pains of living on an island that has a complex history and relationship to the world through shipping, commerce, exchange and encounter. What great stories can be told and are told in the creative writing classroom. Embedding thinking and writing in the place we are in through fiction, in the poetic, the creative non-fiction and its scripts does not exclude a worldview, nor does it exclude a cosmopolitan view, but it adds to the world's knowledge. I've read about the Singapore project of land reclamation and building anew, a project that allows stories to emerge as ways of memory making, producing a memorialization that is not nostalgic but powerful, in the ways that a historical photograph might tell of a history of the kampung or the destruction of a forest. The stories that students write speak to the places that they have left to arrive at, or to the personal, the family, and the cultural histories that I have asked them to consider, and not just myself, but the other lecturers in the program. What can writing do? Writing allows us to think differently, to see the world through the eyes of another. Writing informs and educates. Writing produces empathy and understanding. It entertains and it gives pleasure. Tonight, the way the program will proceed is that each reader will introduce themselves, and I will return at the completion of the reading to finalise the proceedings. You may applaud after each person reads. Please join me in firstly congratulating the graduands on their achievements and to welcome them as they read to you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Subh. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Prosser for her guidance throughout this course. I often tell my friends that she's a very kind and compassionate teacher, and she's probably the only teacher whom I follow on Instagram. I want to also thank my friends who have been through with me in this journey. Hanis, Nadia, JJ, and many of you whom I have met in different events. Gabriel, I think he's somewhere, he's not here. The piece that I'm going to read today is an excerpt from the memoir that I wrote as part of my thesis. But it has almost been 1 year since I wrote that thesis. I hate it now. As writers, we evolve, we get better. And when we relook at our work, we find flaws in it. So I'm going to read a poem, an unpublished poem, that is from that memoir. Now, it's a very different process of converting an excerpt into a poem. Partly because by nature, memoir is something which is very close to our heart. And now we're tasting everything that we have written and we have spent so much time and we have so much emotions in writing and converting into a poem. Without telling much about the poem, because if I do that, it's going to spoil the entire poem, I'm going to read it. The name of the poem is Flying Shoes. 1. My right shoe flies like a blackbird. I'm out of step with time. 2. 2 stuffed socks that bent my toes have become its musty wings. 3. Left, right, left. I marched to the kitchen. The socks were my darts parting wisdom. 4. Arriving late, my high school headmaster's eyes are red as the red tongue of a buffalo, which Kala rides, his 4 arms spread like a net, trying to catch a flying shoe. 5. 5 days before my neighbor died, the old lady screamed. Perhaps she could hear death, the bell on the buffalo's neck. 6. The morning prayer bell has already rang without me. My friends have sang without me. 7. Like a diving eagle swing a monkey away, my shoes pursue me, while my friends guffaw like wicked buffaloes in an open field. Number 8. The holy sound of the prayer lingers. The monkey mocking of my friend turned languors. 9. I hold my breath. How I wish my shoes would hold my feet. I hold myself together, yet to fix myself in time. 10. While wobbling on my feet like a glass before it shatters, the headmaster's command for silence tintinnabulates in my ears. Years later. Number 11. As dewdrops stick to a blade of grass. Number 12. I'm tall enough now not to hold up other cadets or to measure myself against the others. Number 13. The blackbird doesn't need the cherry blossom any longer to be polished black. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Tan and I'm reading the second half of a story on grief. Huge thanks to my supervisor Donna for helping me shape the story to what it is today. So my story title is called Little Bean. Upon discharge, my mother brings me back to her home, but I refuse to rest. Knee-deep in her garden, I begin murdering the money plants snaking all over the fence and lawn. They breed like a disease, inching their way, curling themselves up over anything to get more of the sun, a light you'll never see and never feel. After shearing off their leaves and stems, I go for the bougainvilleas. Their large petals are open so wide, they look like they are yawning, reminding me how very much alive they are and how you're not. I pluck out handfuls of their flowering heads, scattering purple into the air. When this isn't enough, I dig into their underground roots and pull them out. Soon, innocent cherry tomatoes are bursting in my hands, sticky reddish-brown liquid dripping between my fingers. I'm making the garden wither, as if its last breath could be an exchange for your first. I can't stop until the overpowering smell of my mother's perfume overwhelms me, her arms a steady pillar as I scream and scream. Her voice is soothing, light as the pollen floating in the air. She says I'm doing well, the best I can. She tells me to just be, that everything happens for a reason. It felt like poison, her always tilting her face towards the light, trying to see the good in everything even when there was nothing good to hold on to. But how does anyone justify this? To have you passing out of me over 2 weeks. I couldn't even bring myself to see where your eyes began and nose ended, before crumbling onto the cold bathroom towels. Before she gets to, things will get better, I stand up and walk away. If you had a shot at growing up, you would have chided me for being rude. When I lie in bed and hear her crying over the father I never really knew, I know there's still that hardness in her. His clothes, books, and electronics are long gone. Any hint of him is absent in the breeze that flows through the house. You're not a bean. Your skin is milky, soft and smooth like the bean curd I know you'll grow to love when you get a taste. We are in the woods, dark and twisted branches looming over us. You are crawling and I'm following you. You are curious, giggling at the sound of crispy, decaying brown leaves under your feet. I hold my breath as you go under a rotting tree trunk covered in wet moss. It looks like a large beast swallowing you up, and I keep screaming, "Little bean," as I crawl after you. Your head pops out from one of the holes in the tree trunk, and in your hands are 5 beans. Almond-shaped hazel eyes pierce through the foliage. Something watches us. It howls, a sadness so stark it almost matches mine. I tell you to get behind me, but you let go of the beans and crawl away. I go after you, tripping over tree roots. You keep crawling away and I keep following, my legs never fast enough to catch up. You seek refuge in hay, and I tuck you into my loose belly, a map of stretch marks running everywhere. You refuse to stay, and the wolf gives an almighty blow before the hay rains everywhere, all over us. You keep crawling away, following a long trail of breadcrumbs, and the wolf comes after us, its paws heavy and loud on moss. I am crashing through forked branches, my breath leaving me in sharp bursts. You start to twitch and begin to move robot-like back and forth. "What's happening?" I cry, still unable to reach you. Your milky skin turns shiny, and soon you look like plastic. I try picking you up, but you liquefy and turn bright red. My heart is splintering, and I try to scoop as much as you up, but you slip from my fingers and evaporate. And in a place where you would have been, beanstalks sprout into the dark sky. The wolf is watching me, and I am breathing hard, the sound of my drumming heart in my ears. I sit up in bed, guilt flooding my chest. These aren't the stories I meant to tell you. Even in my dreams, I fail to keep you safe. My relationship with your grandmother wasn't always so difficult. I remember hugging her legs whenever it stormed outside, pestering her late at night in bed to check if the doors were locked one last time. She used to read stories even when she got home late from her shift at the office. My favorite was Hansel and Gretel, thanks to how they defeated evil in their world. When I found out about you, I knew you would be named Gretel. Your grandmother is old now. Her skin soft like old tofu, specked with lines and spots. Her skin betrays her age, but she is a tank. Alone, she forced me out into the world through a tiny hole in her body, and she has barely fallen apart even without your grandfather. A week later, I find myself wandering around in the garden. Your grandmother single-handedly cleared the damage I had done. It lies bare, waiting to be rebuilt. I hold 5 green beans in my palm, let my shame fall onto the soil. Even through her grief over losing you, your grandmother drags me out of the house whenever possible, and I placate her nagging to stay positive, summoning whatever energy I have. The grocery store is the furthest I can go without begging to turn back home. And when I see yet another pregnant lady walk by the vegetable aisle, I want to run so far and fast I can't breathe. The bed of vegetables and fruits I had planned on pureeing for you at your 6-month mark stares at me, and my insides are being reduced to pulp. I start to hyperventilate, but your grandmother gives me a sharp look that says, "Don't," before flashing a smile at the woman, asking how far along she is. I don't remember ever hating her more. On the walk home, I finally managed to get words out. You don't care. I do. You only care about not being a grandmother. Instead of guilt, I feel my insides searing when I look into her eyes. I want to relieve her pain, but if I hurt her, I never have to endure my ache alone. She averts her eyes, her lips pinched together, unwavering. For dinner, my mother places a manuka honey on the kitchen table. I get up to leave, carrying my shame, a deafening silence pinned against my heart. She tells me to sit, and we are again across from each other. My mother dips into the square-shaped container and feeds me an entire spoonful. The atmosphere tightens, and for a flicker of a moment, I see a storm brewing in her eyes. We continue this way, each spoonful she feeds me, a moment of resentment erased between us. There are days when I would prefer nothing more than to splay in your tiny nursery, ragdolled on the floor. The empty space looms, a reminder of how you're no longer here. I imagine the walls whispering among each other, wondering when they would get to see you. I'll run over the little time we had together and think of what I might have done to cause this. Taking the honey, eating too many pineapples, drinking a sip of coffee, smelling my friend's wine, applying expired deodorant, running for the bus, not exercising, forgetting to take calcium and iron pills, not washing my hands before eating, my mother's favorite, giving you a name before you're out. I don't know how to behave without you inside my body. Knives are no longer going through my breasts when I touch them. I look at them in the mirror under my shirt, imagining them stained with milk, being so engorged when you arrive, dripping like a faucet left unfixed. I will take it. I will take all the discomfort and pain. I think of the steady flow of milk flowing into your little mouth, and I wonder what you would have looked like. In my mind, you are a duplicate of me, of your grandmother, and nothing like our fathers. I hold on to this pain and guilt, and wonder if I could have done anything to prevent losing you. I don't want to find a release, because if I move on from it, I'm afraid it will make you less real. My arms are empty, and I'm a mother without a baby. It will be years till I can finally look a pregnant lady in the eyes without being betrayed by my tears. Who knows how many losses they have been through before where they are now. Before, all I could think about was, it should be me. That's how far along I should be now. Lucky bitch, I would kill to be waddling even if it hurts. I see kids running amok and daydream of what you would be like. Would you have been a beaming sparkle wherever you went? Or like me, always nestling behind your mother's arms? Either way, I know every cell in me would burst open whenever I looked at you, little bean. I am an island, sopping up the tides of grief and anger coming in waves. Blood-red beans spatter the sand. The pain keeps pulsing like a deep wound, and the wolf will come with its pack, circling me with you in my arms. They will come close, their breaths moist, heavy in my ears. You are squirming and alive in my hands, no longer liquid. I will lift you on my shoulders as my mother stands between us and the wolves. She will drop to the sand, the waves swallowing her whole. Her blood turns into bean-shaped clots and she is nothing but a whisper. The beasts are coming now. I will lift you up higher even as they tear flesh from me, chewing my bones. This time, I will keep you safe. When I wake, I stare at my empty palms. My eyes eventually drain of tears, and my legs stop buckling even though I'm alone. Out in the garden, my mother is down on fours, moving up and down as she weeds the garden, throwing herself completely into it. The smell of damp earth lingers in the balmy air. My fingers run along tear-shaped leaves and their smooth, slender pods. They climb with their vines, leaning into the trellis for support. Without a word, my mother passes me a container, and I start snapping one bean pod off at a time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nadia. I'm going to be reading from my thesis, which is also a novel in progress called The Probability of Everything, which is inspired by the people I know and love, though I decided not to invite any of them tonight. Instead, I said to my friends Hanis and Gabriel, who is not here yet, that I'm going to invite Soup. And one of them said, but this is also his graduate reading. So this one's for Soup and Hanis and Gabriel when he gets here. Chapter 1. Alhan, Wednesday, 16 March 2022, London, 6:24:03 hours. If you lived forever, you might get to experience every single outcome to every single possible situation that you face throughout the course of your life. Would you want to? For the past 4 days, I've been thinking about my biological mother more than I'd like. It started on Sunday morning as I was eating breakfast. An unknown number called me on my mobile phone. At first, I thought the girl on the other line was a student playing a prank on me, and I hung up. Another call followed with the girl promising information. Please, she said, just hear me out. I know your mother, Nora. I hung up immediately, my head shaking and my breath catching in my throat. No one in London knows about my biological mother, much less her name. As a senior lecturer at Imperial College London, I keep to myself. I socialize at work and outside of work only when absolutely necessary. As a happy hermit, I'll never divulge anything about my personal life, nothing that would invite interest or curiosity. 2 years ago, I'd answered my colleague Adrian's question about the number of siblings I have. 1, I said. Older or younger, a brother or a sister, he asked. I looked at the overly eager expression on his face and shrugged. I knew telling him that I have a twin sister would be too much for his inquisitive mind to handle. Since then, it's become a bit of a joke for him. Once in a while, he will greet me, oh Alhan of the unknown sibling. The irony is, I'm the one who appreciates anonymity, not my twin, Eva. Is there any way Adrian could have Googled me and found something, maybe a mention on Eva's old blog when she was a teenager? I've never actually read her blog, but there's a chance that Eva could have mentioned our biological mother, even her name perhaps. Maybe Adrian blabbed this information to his girlfriend or something and is now playing a prank on me. I snap myself out of my thoughts with a vigorous shake of the head. I am not fond of rumination. It is not productive. The sky looks a strange kind of muddy orange. Though I consider myself agnostic, the Muslim in me thinks maybe God is in a bad mood. Maybe the apocalypse is near. I grimace, anticipating how Adrian will be droning on about the sky later in the staff lounge to me and our other colleague Tess. I don't know enough about eschatology to understand why an orange sky might be correlated with the end of the world. Therefore, I have to rely on what I know, science. There's a logical explanation for the sky color. It's Rayleigh scattering caused by the Saharan dust. Additional dust scatters the blue light, leaving more purely red and yellow light to go through the atmosphere. The last time this happened was October 16th, 2017. If she was here, I think Eva might respond in the same way she has in the past when I present a fact to her. Shake her head with a small smile and say, "Oh, Al, she told me once, you remember facts better than many people remember their own opinions." Is it a fact that our biological mother is dead? I try to let go of this intrusive thought. Facts just stick in my brain. I might have an eidetic memory, but I cannot verify that. Science has never found a single verifiable case of photographic memory. I can remember the population of London in 2020 after my lecture told us, an estimated 9.2 million. The population of Singapore as of June 2021 was 5.45 million. 78.7% of the population stayed in flats, 16.0% stayed in condominiums and other apartments, and 5% of Singaporeans stayed in landed properties. I read that once on the Statistics Singapore website when it was published last September. I used to be one of the 5%. Well, I still am, I suppose, but I do not own any property in Singapore. When I visit my place of birth, I stay with my parents at Taman Kembangan. As for trivia, I find uninteresting, but other humans seem to care about. The chances of dating a supermodel are 1 in 88,000. The oldest evidence of penetrative intercourse is about 385 million years old, and it takes 6 months to build a Rolls Royce. I'm more interested in natural science facts. Dragonflies are the most effective hunters with a 95% success rate. The chances of being ambidextrous are 1 in 100. Seaweed can grow up to 12 inches per day. It takes 492 seconds for sunlight to reach Earth. The odds of having fraternal twins are 1 in 85. That's 1.18%. Eva and I are that 1.18%. As a left-hander with a right-handed twin, I know that left-handedness is more likely to occur in twins than in single births. If one parent is left-handed, in dizygotic and monozygotic twins, there's a 21% chance of one being left-handed. I'm that 21% chance. My biological mother is left-handed. I saw a photo of her in the box that my father gave us when we were 10. She was using her left hand to paint a portrait of Frida Kahlo on a canvas. Enough, Al. No more thoughts about the dead. It would be more productive to think about how I'm going to approach Tess and Adrian to propose a co-working opportunity to them. I'm working on a book that examines the probability of everything I think might interest a young university student, with motivational chapters on how anything you want out of life is possible. I think it is. I'm not one of the most successful people. I wouldn't feature on a Forbes list of billionaires or be nominated for a TED Talk on the secrets of success. I wouldn't win the Abel Prize, the equivalent of a Nobel in mathematics. But I am successful by my definition because I've accomplished every significant goal I set for myself since I was a student growing up in Singapore. After my shower, I move to the floor right in front of my couch and sit comfortably on it with my eyes closed. I've been practicing transcendental meditation for 8 months now. I taught myself after watching YouTube. Technically speaking, a person is supposed to attend a course to learn transcendental meditation from a certified teacher. However, I have no interest to spend money to do so. I read from a website that the specific sound assigned to males in my age range at the time, 30 to 34, is shivering. So that's the word I meditate on, shivering. I'm in my 4th shivering when my phone rings. I do not get up. I feel anger rise in me. I'm blocking the number again, I tell myself. But wait, Al, you're making an assumption that it is the mystery caller. It might not be. It might be your sister. She's the only one who calls me, apart from the mystery caller. Eva's face comes to my mind. She's about to open her mouth to say something. I let the image of her face leave my mind just as peacefully as it came. When I'm done with meditation, I stand up and look at my violin in its stand. It's a Nicola Zubak. I appreciate its crystal clear tone with bell-like resonance. Violin practice for today is scheduled at 6 in the evening, as it always is on weekdays. I'm feeling calm and centered after meditation. Taking a glance at my mobile phone, I wonder what to do next. Soon, I will have to take the short walk from my apartment to the South Kensington campus. I have a class at 9. But an idea comes to me just then. You could search for missing people on your desktop, more precisely, how to find a missing person. Our parents told us she was dead. But what if they don't know that for sure? What if she's actually alive? What is the probability that someone who has been missing for 34 years and 4 months will return? I have no idea, but I'll try to find out. My worst fear in life right now, if I'm being honest, is that Nora could return. It would upset everything that Mom and Papa have built together for 33 years and 2 days. It might destabilize us. I grab my phone off the dining room table, look at the 2 missed calls from this new number. I haven't told anyone about the calls, though I do want to tell Eva. I think telling her in person would be easier. I can anticipate better what her mood will be like that day and gauge when would be the right time to tell her. What my sister feels is always written all over her face. Eva is fun, but she can be unpredictable. I have no idea how she'll react to the news when I do tell her. She might be so focused on work that day that what I say barely registers. If I tell her after she spends some time painting in a studio, she might be feeling peaceful. Just a mischievous student lah, she might say, as she waves her hand dismissively at me on our weekly Zoom call. If she has just had yet another bad date, she's likely to be feeling so disappointed and angry that she might tell me I have to report the student to my boss. Immediately else, she would command. If she's just been thinking of Nora, she might start off feeling very eager, urging me to find out more from the mystery caller, but then feel hesitant and upset all over again that we have never met Nora. She might start to tear. I put my phone in my backpack and shoulder it. Of all the things we are taught in school, no one teaches us what to do when a person goes missing. What is the goal of those left behind? To find closure? Is that why our parents told us Nora died? Better to mourn a deceased parent than to look for a missing one? I hope she's dead. Please be dead. Please be dead. I let the thought run through my mind repeatedly, feeling powerless. By the time I reach campus, I've convinced myself that there's more than a 50% chance that the thought is true. I'm never more nervous than when I have to ask someone for something in a professional capacity. I'm loath to admit that I don't know all the answers, that I can't do everything on my own, that I need another person's knowledge and expertise. Collaborating with colleagues can complicate matters. I watch Tess wash her hands and take a deep breath. Tess is my friend. I can do this. Tess comes by the table, a wrapped sandwich cradled in her arm, and her right hand carrying a cup of tea. It smells like warmth, cardamom, cinnamon, and ginger. Chai. The smell helps calm me down. How's your day going? Tess asks, peeling the paper off the sandwich. I stare at the smoked salmon and watercress peeking out from in between the bread. I'm so hungry but too nervous to eat. I'll grab a quick bite after I speak with Tess and Adrian. Good so far, I say. Yours? I can't complain, Tess says. I nod my head slowly as I decide to cut to the chase. At that moment, I hear Adrian's voice. Usually, I try my best to look as busy as I can, so Adrian will not talk to me. But today, I want to ask him and Tess for a meeting where I'll ask them to be co-authors. I wait for him to join us at the table. Tess starts to tell me about the question a student asked during her morning lecture. I nod, smile, use filter words like and yes. When Adrian appears, he chuckles. How is this guy always in a good mood? Hello, friends, he says as he sits down next to me. After Tess and I greet him, Adrian starts to shovel macaroni into his mouth. I take a sip of my espresso. Eva's voice comes to me. You can write this on your own, Al. I know you don't like to collaborate with others, but it will be beneficial to get a co-author. I look down at my palms. They're wet with fear. Mom's voice comes to me now. In life, Al, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Papa's voice is loud and bellowing in my ear. 16 years ago, he'd shouted at me, "Are you a man or a coward?" because I'd refused to learn how to drive. I didn't want to admit that I was afraid, but I still am. Burning with indignation at the recollection of the memory, I wipe my palms on my pants and tell myself to channel Eva. I open my mouth and let the words fall out. I'm working on a book on statistics and probability. Can I set up a meeting with the both of you to see if you'd be interested in co-authorship? Wow, Adrian says. His enthusiasm is off-putting, but I remind myself that he has a background in mathematical physics that my book needs. That's interesting, Tess says, her dark curls bouncing. Soon, we're agreeing to a date and time. That wasn't so bad. I let out a small sigh of relief. In front of me, my phone lights up, filling me with dread. I lean forward slightly to look at it. At this point, I have the familiar number memorized, and I think, who are you and what do you want? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jinendra Jain. I'd like to start off by thanking Dr. Daryl Vetter, Dr. Christopher Merrill, Dr. Roslyn Prosser, and for putting up with us on a Friday night, Dr. Ledbetter. Right. I'll read an excerpt from my memoir in progress, tentatively titled Did Not Finish. The personal memoir cum spiritual travelogue describes my struggle with grief and injury during an 8-stage, 170-kilometer long, high-altitude trail race through the wind and water-scarred badlands of the culturally Tibetan, once forbidden, trans-Himalayan kingdom of Mustang, Nepal. A race that was also a pilgrimage on behalf of my late father. The excerpt from a chapter titled Konchokling describes events on day 5 of the race. I start climbing a winding 6 to 8 foot wide path cut into the soft sandy side of a deeply eroded mountain. A pale white side that turns golden, then pink, and then red as I inch up a still barren moonscape of rock that seems to come alive under the mesmerized gaze of sylph-like white clouds hanging from an ardently blue sky. I understand why the wispy white clouds are lingering, despite the as yet gentle diurnal wind, when the path curls around the mountain, revealing a surreal canyon writhing with thousands of deep sienna red rock towers sprouting like stalagmites from somewhere deep down the valley floor. An unearthly sight that anesthetizes the not so mild Achilles tendon pain in my mind. And maybe I subconsciously sense that even a picture as otherworldly as this must, in the fullness of time, fade from my mind, for I stop for photographs every few meters until I find myself carefully navigating a narrow trail that leads me to a dusty ledge a quarter of the way down to the valley bottom. More photographs follow, some unfortunately with me in them, standing legs apart on the little ledge, my Oakley sunglasses in one hand, beaming a somewhat silly smile brimming over with what feels like a deep sense of contentment as I gape with childlike wonder at the cathedral-like dead end of the canyon, at what the Lobas call Konchokling. Entranced, I trace an exposed trail to the doorless stone gate of the Gaudiesque sky-domed cathedral, where wind and water have passionately sculpted a stormy sea of spires over many millennia. And as I climb a steep ramp to the apse's rim, I feel blessed by what seem to be countless upturned faces, brows furrowed in prayer, floating on frozen red waves, beating against sheer walls of fluted organ pipes, their prayers aching to be sung to the empty sky. Emptied of my ego, of everything except this impossible beauty, liberated for a few fleeting moments from shrill insecurities and absurd conceits, I stumble upon bliss. And I stumble upon the sacred, not far from the crumbling walls of a small and lonely square-shaped fort standing atop Konchokling's undulating rim. Frayed ropes dangle down the apse's outer wall to a recently rediscovered cave temple. I do not, due to fear and lack of fitness, climb down to the cave, but those who do talk of deeply faded 600 to 800-year-old Buddhist murals on rough rock walls exposed to sun, wind, and on the rare occasion rain, making me wonder about the great adepts who painted these unsigned murals when not meditating, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor of an almost inaccessible cave with unbroken views of the perennially snow-clad Himalayas. Adepts who, perhaps, stumbled upon some sort of liberation from self and suffering, despite a solitude so utter that the seeker is suffocated by the very self he seeks to let go. My brief respite from the insistent preoccupations of the self is soon over when I gingerly start shuffling down Konchokling's steep ramp in a clumsy half-squat posture, cursing myself for clambering up the narrow ridge and hoping, in the event of sliding down the slippery gravel, to land on my well-padded behind instead of toppling over into the blood-red streaked canyon. I step out of the doorless gate with a vague sense of loss at leaving Conchokling and a deep sense of relief at doing so in one uninjured piece. Relief that turns out to be short lived, for the persistent but thus far dull throbbing in my right knee flares up into searing bolts of pain as I retrace the interminable switchbacks that had led me up the mountain. My right leg feels as stiff as a bamboo stick as I try dragging the useless leg down the dusty descent without bending the knee, but can't. By the time the trail sort of flattens out, my silent screams at every little flexion and extension of my swollen right knee feel louder than the howling diurnal wind. And I berate myself, not for the first time in my adult life, for not listening to my physician wife. She had, soon after the Himalayan 100-mile stage race I finished 6 months ago, explained the mechanics of patellofemoral pain syndrome, of what most non-medicos call runner's knee, to me. The patella or kneecap, she said, slides along a V-shaped groove at the end of the femur or thigh bone every time I bend or straighten my knee. A trifecta of reasons: sudden overuse without a measured increase in running mileage on hilly terrain over the months preceding the Himalayan race, inadequate weight training to strengthen my glutes and thigh muscles, and the overpronation of my flat arched right foot had, in her opinion, come together to force my kneecap laterally off course towards the outside of my knee. And the resulting friction between the thigh bone and the kneecap, on a joint subject to more than 3 times my body weight when running downhill, had corroded the cartilage lining my patellofemoral joint, an injury only time and rest could heal. When she next broached the subject, about a fortnight before I flew to Nepal for the Mustang Trail race, I argued that the knee pain had lain dormant for months, an unstated consequence, perhaps, of my inconsistent and inadequate training in the intervening weeks. Demurring, she predicted that the pain would rear its ugly and debilitating head should I subject my long-suffering knee to Mustang's steep and sustained downhills, and, just in case I'd forgotten, reminded me that my tender Achilles tendon was like a ticking time bomb on the erstwhile kingdom of Low's unforgiving uphills. And she, as it unfortunately turns out, was absolutely right. About 90 miserable minutes after being blessed with almost mystic moments of blissful oneness, upon bearing witness to the divine beauty of Conchokling, I limp into the race checkpoint with the bitter taste of dust and defeat in my mouth, knowing that this is where I drop out of not only today's stage, but also, in all likelihood, the remaining 4 stages of the race. Thank you.
Hello, it's me, Hanis. So I'm just going to jump straight into reading and maybe share about it after. So this poem is called Patchwork. The door has been unlocked for years. Do not underestimate the kind heart as weak. The one hurt is the one who stays. A once masterpiece in this body framed upon the heart of my museum. Your footnote is a disclaimer. In your hesitation was a reply which never came. How do you empty a void? Sadness does not leave when it visits, making home with broken pieces of hope. We love better when away. I left in my absence as present. Sleep's fleeting touches, touching in whispers, demanding, such dreams are but wishful thinking. If this bait was ablaze, with passion of missing you, I know you'd still be missing too. Everything I know of you is around except you. Drowning from the heaviness of missing someone never truly there. Your face is silent, but the grief is loud. Pause for effect, then disappear. The forbidden fruit is the most enticing. You shook the tree and I met gravity to stand next to you, only to feel the furthest. Your wants and longings, say it through the static or in silence, I hear it anyway. You've got this, I've got you, in the back of my mind, lonely and quiet, while appeasing the noises in my brain that you love so much. I like to think the songs are about me, even when time is money and we are bankrupt. I continue to apologize for being the wrong kind of person that you need. Drove me home and we reached you. I should go, for I know if I don't, I'll miss you for the rest of my life. It hasn't stopped raining since. It is now 19th of May. It rains still. So the work just now probably only sound familiar to one person in this room, and it's because it was from my creative work I did last year. So I've always said that no one will ever get to read the compilation of poetry or prose ever from it, but I decided to kind of weave the different lines from all the poems together and make something out of it. So maybe that's why it may have not made sense. But then again, since when has poetry ever made sense? Right. So the next one I planned to read was a fiction piece, but no story ever felt right. So I thought I'll just share a draft of what I had written to post up on my birthday a few days ago. So you are hearing it for the first time. The day I turned 30, nothing changed. The world still sucked. I felt the very same. The house, however, the first decade, a bright yellow house stands before a grassy lawn, landscaped bountifully, hopes and dreams earthed by the soft wrinkled fingers of my mother, roof hammered in by my father's callous palms and cigarette-stained nails, the sound of rebellious laughter from the bedroom next to mine. My sister's spirit echoes through the hallways. Furnished with love and compassion, leathered skin matching the sofa, polished new, sturdy and healthy relations like the waxed teakwood floor. It all seemed very much too big for someone so small. The house was my world. The second decade, everything felt too small. The house shivered and shook. Nothing could fit in it. Not my anger, not my frustration, not a thought of the potential it could be. Yellow turned to orange, orange turned to red. The door opened and closed. Bells rang, the uninvited surprises. Most days I am nowhere near. For days it was forgotten. And when wear and tear demanded, my parents too sought to hold it up with their rickety knees and sore muscles. My sister had doubled the noise and laughter and left with her legacies, holding one in each hand. And the third decade, the house is still. There hasn't been any small footsteps to trace, only a snoring lullaby to accompany. Dilapidated and lonely, surrounded by a self-made wall of bricks, yet arguably it is safe. The guests that once came never visited again. They pass by on the outside, sometimes they wave, but the ghosts from the windows never bother to even look, so busy haunting the halls, still trying to find the glory days. The yellow has dulled. A house barely standing and weary, with a spine that cracks like 1,000-year-old stairs under the weight of the world, wallpaper fraying like shattered skin, dust littering the way out. I've been sitting on a chair in the basement, waiting for it to crumble. Everyone has left. No one wants to come. But now I'm at the corner, broom in hand, thinking, if I sweep away at the cobweb thoughts of self-pity, maybe I can stop dwelling in it. Throw the window open, let some sunlight in. Maybe it'll look yellow again. Maybe I'll start to breathe once more. The house has changed. The house can be whatever I want it to be. The house is me. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Bryce Merkl Sasaki, and I'll be reading a portion from my science fiction novel in progress, which was also part of my thesis. Though this portion isn't in my thesis, you can find the second part of this on the posters in the courtyard downstairs, which I have to do a shout out because I helped design them, and so did Vanessa, who's somewhere here. So shout out to Vanessa. So do check those out later. Some of those pieces weren't read tonight, but you can get more sample of the creative writing program. So, okay, let's begin. I did want to thank my thesis advisor, Ang Yisheng, Dr. Prosser, and Carol Lou Tennis for her coaching on the last part of this piece. Torben hadn't made ink for years. He ground the ink stick into the inkstone with slow, methodical circles. He meditated on the act of creation, the unceasing loops that turned friction into beauty. Every circle was an eternity. Before him sat the four treasures of the study: brush, inkstick, paper, inkstone. Torben had laid them all out with care. He dusted off the memories of each one, recalling the rebukes and lessons of a strict tutor from his childhood. Terrible, chided the elderly tutor. Look at this watery ink. If you overthink the details, you will drown. Calligraphy requires flow. Set aside your conscious thought. Do not think. just flow. It was a lesson that shaped Torben as a soldier, a racing pilot, and now a coach. Once the ink was the right consistency, Torben carefully soaked the brush and wiped off the excess ink. He warmed up by writing the character he'd been forced to copy endlessly as a child. Yong. Forever, permanence, perpetual, eternity. It meant all of those things. The perfect character for a beginner, said the old tutor. Now, again. Endless repetition had turned Yong into an eternal torture for Torben as a child. That night, in his flat, Torben practiced it once more, making up for years of neglect. After filling an entire sheet, he set out a fresh piece of rice paper. He flattened it, adjusted the paperweight, re-soaked the brush, wiped off the excess ink. Hua Dujuan had been the one to encourage his calligraphy after all those years. Calligraphy? She smiled that day in the Momo shop on the first date. Really? Torben smiled sheepishly. Yeah, I hated it as a kid, but I haven't practiced it for years. That's so surprising, she giggled. Here I thought you were just a jock bribing me with Nepali food for a date. You should take it up again. I want to see something you write. Yesterday he had visited her grave at sunrise along the Narmada River. He swept off the leaves of many autumns and the dust of the city. As he cleaned, he caught a glimpse of a figure in the corner of his eye, but when he turned, nothing was there. A ghost in the graveyard. Torben sat and meditated with her a while. He left behind 2 joss sticks of burning incense and a garland of her favorite flowers. That night he was going to write out her name in calligraphy. The brush trembled in Torben's hand. Black ink dribbled onto the untouched paper below. Tears littered the scroll, diffusing the ink and further splotching the paper. The tiger engraved into the paperweight stared back at him with blank, sapphire eyes. He couldn't bring himself to do it. She hadn't been awed by his fame or prowess as a racing pilot. In fact, it was all so off-putting that she turned down his first request for a date. If she ever did notice his flashy persona, the trophies, the speeding records, the glitzy adverts, it was all with rolled eyes. Dujuan only saw him as a human being. It was magnetically appalling. Torben dropped the brush onto the paper and stood up. He stepped out onto the balcony of his flat and into the evening air. New Quezon brimmed with life. The district was named after the city of stars back on Earth, and was just as crowded. Somewhere, several stories below, a mother lullabied her baby to sleep. Above him, the Mabatha family had sat down for a hot breakfast of sinan ag at ilog, dishes clattering, kids chattering. For many residents of New Quezon, their new 24-hour circadian cycle would take place in the dark of night. Torben remembered taking the call just 2 months earlier. He had been far away on Earth, hidden in the Himalayas. Her death wasn't an accident, said Dreiser Steele, his old race manager. She was murdered. Torben's face drained from red hot to pale white, his furrowed eyebrows slackening from the shock. Dujuan's death had been a murder? Come back and help us win this season, said Dreiser over the weak audio. The team needs you. We'll help you bring the perpetrator to justice. We'll give you every resource at our disposal, anything you need. But the investigation was proceeding at a glacial pace, a hostage to the tight racing season schedule. You brought me all the way here, thought Torben, clenching the rail of the balcony. You dragged me out of isolation just to increase your shareholder value, and we're not a single step closer to the truth. He wanted vengeance, but he wasn't sure it would bring him peace. Torben turned from the balcony. With a mental command, he modded his clothing for exercise and threw on a sweatshirt. He slipped on his running shoes at the door. Torben never took the lift when he ran. It was 937 steps to the ground floor. The perfect warm-up. Down, 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 down. His troubled thoughts swirled and scrambled desperately like water afraid to get flushed down a drain, but with every descending step his mind emptied further. His heart and breathing quickened. He began to sweat. Dujuan liked to run too. They'd crossed paths for the second time while they were each on a run. It was his only other chance to ask her out. She probably would have refused him again if he had offered to show her the best momo shop in the city of Aeon. When his feet hit the final step, he was ready to run. And Aeon waited. He ran and ran and ran. His griefs couldn't keep up. His worries waned. It was a state of zen. No thoughts, only breath, only movement. His feet took him where they will. He wound through New Quezon's street market, alive with night vendors, hawking their wares over sizzling pans of fresh food or crowded booths of miscellaneous wares, spices, porridge, ale, bras, tamales, flashlights, curry, baklava, neckties, french fries, flesh, and glow-in-the-dark action figures. He ran between stacks and stacks of housing, hundreds of stories high, knowing that behind the light of every window was a story as deep and as complex as his own. Somewhere up there, a young couple was making love, just like Torben and Jujuan once had. Some woman was teaching her new boyfriend how to meditate, despite his dismissive groans. Some man was smiling not for the holocams, but out of genuine joy for the woman he loved. It was all too much. Torben shook his head and ran harder, outpacing the memories. He left New Quezon and wove through the Istanbul district. Spires, vimanas, domes, steeples, stupas, pagodas, and minarets silhouetted against the rising moon. Prayers and chants flowed through the streets like a bubbling brook. Incense was thick in Torben's nostrils. The Istanbul was a district of brilliant lights and deep shadows. His feet wandered on, his breath working hard to keep up. His heart pounded louder than his conscious thought. Every hard pulse drowned out another memory. He ran and ran, through the Mongol and past the Arc de Triomphe, across the bridges of Tres Rios, down between the skyscrapers of the Agora, up the brutal hills of high woods. He kept running. Aeon hadn't been her city, but she'd adopted it as her own. After a row with the government, Dujuan ran for office. The Aeon constituency was competitive, but had never intimidated her. Dujuan was nothing but grit. She and her team had determined to knock on the door of every home in the city, canvassing for votes. Critics called it foolhardy, but the goal galvanized staffers and drew in thousands of volunteers. She never tried to leverage Torben's fame, even when he had offered. Her work stood on its own. Torben respected her for it, more now than he had back then. But her oath of office never came. I can't keep outrunning her, Torben thought, not in this city. He put a hand on the growing stitch in his side. Torben jogged slower as he descended from the high woods into the Sinai. Officially, the Sinai was an arts district, but quietly it had become a thriving neighborhood for Aeon's non-human citizens, alien species from around the Commonwealth who'd flocked to the capital for jobs, government posts, or life on another world. Dujuan had won the Sinai handily. This district's architecture was a bazaar of the bizarre. Buildings waved, abutted, and jutted every which way, following strange logics that were either other or all too human. Torben pressed on. From every window and street corner he was watched, with eyes that weren't eyes, or observed by alien senses beyond human comprehension. Athletic fame had accustomed him to turning heads. The sound of faint music reached his ears. Somewhere nearby, people, humans, were singing. Torben slowed to a walk as he approached the source of the music. The building looked like a huge upside-down iceberg of rock. Sharp, rugged edges protruded and contorted upwards in a fierce landscape of pinnacles and buttresses. He stopped outside the building's main arching doorway. Brilliant golden lights spilled into the streets of the Sinai, along with the sweet pine smell of resin smoke. A long aisle ran down the length of the building's interior, framed by a forest of stone columns. The walls were covered in mosaics that gleamed and sparkled in the light of 1,000 candles. A crowd of humans and non-humans, the whole species spectrum of the Commonwealth, stood for the music. At the far interior of a building, a large ensemble of men and women sang. And here I'll read a little slower. 上帝之羔羊，驱车世人罪的主，求你救了我们。上帝的羔羊，驱车世人罪的主，求你垂怜我们。上帝的羔羊，驱车世人罪的主，求你赐给我们平安。The ensemble repeated the song 8 times, with variations in rhythm and texture. It felt like a mantra or meditation, but also strange and unfamiliar. He didn't understand all of the words, but he could have listened to it in perpetuity. It moved him in ways he could not explain. It almost felt like something was reaching out to him, something eternal. Goosebumps formed over all his body, and he shivered with a sudden chill. Deep called to deep. He was both drawn to and disturbed by it. The song came to an end, and Torben recoiled at the sudden silence. He felt watched, seen, by someone or something nearby. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He turned his head first one way, then another, but found he was still alone on the sidewalk. Whoever or whatever it was eluded him like a figure moving from tree to tree in the back of his mind, motioning him to turn around and come off into the dark, tempting him with a dangerous peace. Instinct took over. He flipped up the hood of his sweatshirt and sprinted away. It was a primordial fear of the unknown, he told himself. Just fear of the dark. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Mary. So before I tell you about my piece, probably I should thank my um, thesis supervisor, and that's Dr. Prosser. I'm really, really grateful for her because I think she's been very, very patient with me and my writer's block, which I never saw coming as well. So, yeah, thank you, Dr. Prosser. Okay, so with that, let me just tell you a bit about my piece. It's called Serial Liquor. So I actually wrote this as part of my formative assessment, but then Donna, Donna, who's sitting at the back, she did say that maybe I could consider doing a short story out of it. But then I decided to instead use it as a base to mash together almost all my pieces together. And so now I've come up with this piece that kind of embodies everything that I've been trying to tell Donna and Dr. Prosser in my whole module, as well as my classmates. So yeah, with that, we will begin Serial Liquor. With promises to click back in place the dislocated soul, she rakes my walkie darling of a brain, setting off triggers intentionally so that unintentionally when tripwired, they implode less. Automatic negative thoughts. She reminds me to wipe out the A-N-T hill. You don't get it. They keep crawling, burrowing, excavating a convolutedly complex network of tunnels. Thoughts stumble, slip, and slide through the wet, abstract art canvas I never intend to paint. I feel like it won't stop. It will stop. Pay attention to your dreams tonight. That night, I dream of licking. I licked the word enough in a dictionary and learned that my enough is not the enough of my mother and her enough is not the enough of her mother. I licked my nephew's blueberries to know if he feels neglected as I did, overshadowed by another tinier being with shriller cries than his. I licked the nose of roadkill. I see it quivering, spotlighted by headlights, and I sense its resignation, and it whispers, "Do my death justice." I ask it why it did not dodge. It gasps with its dying breath, "Because you're worth it." The next session, I ask worriedly, "Am I a serial licker?" I woke up and licked the words I journaled 2 years ago this day. I understood the pain of everyone else around me and no longer just my own. I licked my scalding coffee and tasted the piping hot sambar my parents cook in their only spare time. I licked the bus card reader and recalled the times my father held my hand and ran with Sis and I to the bus stop before running to another bus stop for his own bus to work. What if I meant to lick my way through life? She questions. What's wrong with that? If tongues were only meant for food, why can't we stick them out? So I go home and lick. I lick my mother's pillow to see what wakes her up every day, despite the hateful comments at work. So I help her write her meeting's minutes. I lick my father's steering wheel to know why he grips it a little bit tighter when I say I won't be home for dinner. So I buy him Subway's tuna sandwich with olives, pickles, jalapenos, yellow mustard, and mayo when I can, and he still gives me half of his half. I lick my sister's drain tube in her belly post-surgery to feel the pain she feels at not being able to carry her own children. So I carry them for her. I lick the egg bullseye cooked on roadsides in India on my way to Kerala, visiting meddling relatives who badger me about marriage. Streets deemed unsafe for women from the time the sun sets. Streets serving up the most sinfully flavorful chats, idlis, dosas, pav bhajis. Painfully discriminating streets. That when a woman chooses to explore these dishes with equal rights as men, no matter how well covered, she is still at risk of gropes, brushes, strokes, spin downs, insertions, violations, pregnancies, and deaths. I lick the wispy lashes of cows that plant themselves in the middle of streets, and I contemplate on lynching in their name. The beating up of a politician for serving beef at a private party. The stoning and murder of a 50-year-old Muslim man based on a rumor that he had slaughtered and stored beef in his refrigerator. Police testing the meat to identify whether it was mutton or beef, as if that would validate the crime. I let the cow be and return to my grandmother's arms in Bangalore, where I nestle and sleep. I lick the crevice between her forearm and upper arm, the sweaty crevice. I listen to her commanding grandfather to burn the scorpions that sting me at night when I sleep on the floor. I feel her lift me out when I fall on dusty pebbled roads, losing balance on adult-sized bicycles. I hear her telling my mother, "You are such a burden on my son. Why did I get you married to him?" Her son, my father. And I recall my mother saving his life when she diagnosed him with a massive cardiac arrest before anybody else could. That burden saved his life. Seeking refuge from animals and mankind, I head to church. I lick the nailed feet on the crucifix, hoping my spittle could have eased his pain 2,000 years ago as I hear his cry, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Father, maybe if self-worth hinged on fast celebrations of mediocre achievements, I need not confess I was boastful. Maybe if generational trauma spared intrinsic desires to prove self-worth, I need not confess I was greedy. Maybe if savoring aching loins and pulsing fella was endorsed therapy, I need not confess I was lustful. Maybe if compare and contrast stayed within realms of scientific analysis, I need not confess I was jealous. Maybe if late night binges to ease entrenched sorrows were survivor badges, I need not confess I was a glutton. Maybe if bubbling undertones, disparaging side glances, derisive chuckles, snide remarks never knew the light of day, I need not confess I was angry. Maybe if guilt granted immunity from fear of being forsaken by you, I need not confess at all. This world hurts. Father, this world sucks. Help me see beauty when I can't. Still my heart, even in chaos. Find me when I lose myself. May my licks be pleasing to you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And one day, when you kiss my forehead softly in the womb where I was formed, when you see whom my knitted fingers now entwine, love me still, as she wipes my tears with you, counting all my grace as you have, glorifying in my greatness and forgiving my failures as you do. When all of us walk along the seashore, her hands in mine, mine in yours, may I still see one set of footprints as you carry us both in your arms. Amen. These days, I lick my arms, fingers, legs, toes, belly, chest. A baptism in my own spittle as I lick my way to healing. Thank you.
Thank you for all of our readers. So let's give them one last round of applause. Congratulations to everyone. I think it's been a fabulous reading, and as you know, I'm always proud of you, and I think you're all wonderful. And it's so fabulous to see you come to this point in your degrees. And as Bryce said, there are more works for you to all read down in the near the galleries if you wish to see more works from our students. So thank you very much, and have a good evening. Thank you for coming.